Hi guys, this is Asi from Mexico, and today we're going to be creating an MCP server. An MCP server basically gives our AI model more context. Generally, the AI models that we use have limited context and limited training data, and generally it's older. So to fix that problem, we have MCP servers, which give it new context, and we can limit the context to what we need. So we're gonna today set up a simple MCP server using Python, and to set it up we're going to be using Python, UV, and Claude. So let's get started. So firstly, make sure you've installed UV. You can use pip as well. So we're going to download it. Once that's done, we're going to come to our VS Code, and let's create our folders. So next up, MCP server weather. Okay, so now we'll go into terminal and we'll initialize a UV project. UV init. It will set up our main files, and now we can say UV. We're going to install two packages. One is fast MCP and the other is HTTPX. So fast MCP will allow us to create an MCP server, and the HTTPX will allow us to do HTTPS requests. Once that's done, we will create our file weather server.py. Okay, so we're going to start coding our weather server, which will get weathers based on the location that we give it. Okay, so from fast MCP, import fast MCP, then import HTTPX. Then we will say MCP equals fast MCP, and we'll name our server weather server. Now we will assign it an API key. So we need an API key to get the weather. I've already done this process, and I'll link the website where I get this API key from. It's free to set up. So once we have that, we'll go async. Okay, async define get weather. Okay, so we will make an async function, and we will name it get weather logic, or we can name it anything else. And we will pass in the parameters of locations, which will be a string, and we will pass it the units, which will be a string, and we can just say it's going to be a metric. Okay, so and we will map this as a string. Okay, so once this is done, we will then uh, set the URL equals, and we'll give it the URL for the HTTPS request, right? Okay, and I have to, yeah, I think I was supposed to add a colon. Okay, so we've given it the URL and the parameters. Once that's done, we'll do a try, and we'll say async with HTTPX dot async client as client, and then we'll say response equals await client dot get. We'll do a get request to the URL, and we will pass in the parameters uh, as params. Okay, and will they do response dot raise for, okay, raise for status, and then we'll do response dot data. We'll assign it to response dot json, and that's it. Once that's done, we'll say temp equals data, and we'll get the main temp, and we'll say destination equals data. So basically, we're the response that we get from it, we're just mapping it to variables, whether, and we're gonna get the first item from there, and we'll say description, and then we'll say temp unit equals centigrade. See, we can just say centigrade. Okay, so we will then return, I need to stop using that. We will then return the weather in data. Oh, let me just map that properly. Data, and then say name, and then we can say temp, and we can say temp unit, oh sure, I forgot to add an equals to here. Temp unit with description, right? Okay, so we'll do an accept httpx dot http status error, and we'll say return could not find location, and we can say except in exception as e. So if we do get an exception, so this is basically a try catch block that we have. We have the similar thing in JavaScript as well. So we're just going to see if this works. If it doesn't, we're going to see if there's a status error. If there isn't a status error, we'll see if there's an exception error. So we're basically covering all possible errors to not break our flow. Unexpected error, and then we'll come to the mcp.tool, and we're going to then go async, define get weather and location and units is string equals, okay, equals metric, and we'll say map this to a string. Okay, and then we'll say return await get weather logic, and then we'll pass in the location and the units, and oh sorry, location and units. We can also just go location and units equals units. Once that's done, we're gonna do if name equals main equals main, and we'll say then mcp dot run. Okay, so let's go through this really quickly. We imported our fast MCP, then we did imported our HTTPX to do HTTPS requests. We named our server, assigned the API key, and then made a function to get the weather. We first did define the URL and the parameters that we were going to pass into the API, and then we did an async. Then we made a client and did a get request to the URL and parameters that we defined above. Once we did that, we got a JSON from it, and we just filtered out the data that we needed, and then returned it as the return for this function. If this doesn't work, we then checked if there is a status error, and if there isn't a status error, then we said it could be an exception error. Then we wrapped it into the MCP tool, and then we created a function to call this main function. Once this is done, we will save. Now, to test this, we will create a test.py so that we can basically test if our server is working. Server.py, right? So, so let's just do a really quick import async io from weather server, import get weather logic, and async def run. So we're just going to create a function that will run some tests to our API, and we can say result equals await okay await get weather logic, and we're going to pass in New York, and we're going to say print result. Result. Okay, so once that's done, we're just gonna do if name equals main, then we basically want to if we want to do an async io dot run, and we want to do run tests. Okay, so this is a pretty simple test file that will basically just test if our weather server is working or not. So let's do uv python and we'll do test server. Okay, so now that I've fixed the error, I'm just going to show you how this looks when we run this, and it will get the weather for the city that we passed in. Now we need to connect this with Claude. This step is pretty straightforward. You just go into Claude, go into your settings, and go into developer and click edit config. It's going to open the the Claude library folder, which will have the desktop config. We need to just open this with our VS Code. Once it's open, we come here into the file itself, and now we basically just have to give this the arguments to run. So basically what we did over here, we just have to do it over here. So for that, I already have made one. So what this does is, this is the name for the MCP server, this is the command that we run. So as we're running uv, so we need to give it the path for uv. So for that, we can just do uv where. Okay, so as you can see, when we're running this file, we say uv run python, and we need to do the same for our MCP server, but we can't say uv. So for that, we have to give it the path. So to get that, we will say which uv, and this will give us the path for the command. So we just copy and paste it here, and for the arguments, we pass in directory, then the absolute path of the file, so where the file is. Then we pass in run and weather.py, which is the name of the file. So once this is done, we save this, and we then go back to our Claude. We have to then close out Claude, and we have to open it back in. So this will take some time to load in because it's initializing the MCP server. Okay, so once it's loaded in, if you press this button, you will see that your weather MCP is now running. So just to see what the weather is, we can ask it, what is the weather in where should I check, in Dubai right now, and then we'll just send it the data. So we won't have to parse the data, we don't have to clean it up. It's going to figure that out on its own, and it's going to send it the proper data. And then you can see the weather in Dubai right now is 36. So that's a pretty simple MCP server which we connected, which we made from end to end. This was a pretty simple use case, and we can do more complex use case where we have to just get specific data, and we don't want to, use more context for the AI. So you can use this in many cases. Generally, people use them in RAGs, or if they want to make a chatbot specific to the company. So this was a pretty simple MCP server. If you want me to build something complex, just let me know.